Long before dawn, on a raw November morning in 1780, 8 whaleboats slide out of a Connecticut cove, oars wrapped in cloth so they won't clatter. 80 men sit low in the boats, muskets at their sides, staring into the dark shape of Long Island on the horizon. They aren't running away from the war. They're rowing straight toward it. Their commander is Major Benjamin Tallmadge of the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons. His orders are simple and dangerous. Cross Long Island Sound, land at Mount Sinai Harbor, march across the island in silence, and hit Fort St. George at Mastic, a loyalist post feeding the British war machine around New York. It sounds like a commando raid. It was something more, because many of the men at those oars had already crossed this water once before, fleeing Long Island as refugees 4 years earlier. Tonight, they're going back the other way, not as victims, as raiders. This is Northeast Cold Case. In Revolutionary Refugees, we followed Long Island families who crossed the Sound to Connecticut, losing homes, land, and the lives they thought they'd live. In this episode, we're picking up the story of the ones who didn't stop at survival. From the Connecticut shore, they became militia officers, whaleboat captains, privateers, and spies, using the same water they'd fled across as a weapon against the British. If you only read the town histories, Long Island refugees can look passive, driven out by occupation, taken in by Connecticut, waiting for peace. But the record tells a different story. Frederic Gregory Mathers, The Refugees of 1776, From Long Island to Connecticut, is over 1,000 pages long. And buried in it is a pattern that changes the whole picture. Refugee names reappearing on militia rolls, in service records, and in officer lists. Connecticut's Patriot leadership knew exactly what was arriving on its shore. These weren't just displaced families. Among them were fighting-age men with fresh grievances, men who had seen British occupation up close, men who had left homes and property under enemy control. So Long Island surnames begin turning up inside Connecticut units. Thompson, Tuthill, Gardner, Strong. Men who had already drilled in local militia companies back on Long Island now appear again under Connecticut designations. For them, military service in Connecticut wasn't a fresh start. It was the same fight, carried across the water, and the refugees offered something even more valuable than manpower: local knowledge. In a war fought along coasts, harbors, rivers, and back roads, that kind of knowledge could be decisive. The Long Island men in Connecticut knew which coves could hide a whaleboat at night, which roads curved around a British outpost, which farm belonged to a quiet patriot, and which house might send word to a loyalist officer within the hour. That knowledge became military intelligence. Benjamin Tallmadge understood this better than anyone. He was born in Setauket on Long Island, and from Connecticut he helped build the intelligence network we now call the Culper Spy Ring. Caleb Brewster, another Long Island man, carried reports across the Sound by whaleboat, moving intelligence from occupied territory to the Connecticut shore. So when Tallmadge planned his November 1780 raid on Fort St. George, he was not striking blind. He used Long Island information, Long Island routes, and men who understood that coast as home ground. The force landed at Mount Sinai Harbor, marched south across the island, stormed Fort St. George, destroyed large stores of British hay and supplies, took prisoners, and returned to Connecticut with astonishingly light losses. The operation worked because the refugees had turned memory into strategy. The roads they had once fled along became the roads they attacked along. Not every refugee fought on land. many went back to sea. Long Island Sound became a zone of constant small boat warfare. Whaleboats, privateers, raids, captures, intelligence runs. Fast boats mattered here more than parade ground formations. And refugee mariners from Long Island were perfectly suited to that world. Their names show up all through the record. On the continental frigate Confederacy, John Gardner, John Griffing, David Tuthill, Ebenezer Wade. On smaller vessels, Benjamin Conkling, Edward Conkling, Joseph Conkling. William Havens of Shelter Island commanded the sloop Beaver, armed and active in the Sound. This wasn't symbolic service, it was dangerous, practical war. On January 31st, 1779, Havens and the Beaver joined the Eagle and the brig Middletown in an attack on the Loyalist brig Ranger at Sag Harbor. They captured her and brought her into New London. That is the larger pattern of this episode. Men who had crossed the Sound as refugees were now using that same water to hit British shipping, cut supply lines, and carry the war back toward the places they had lost. And not all service looked dramatic. Connecticut was bleeding manpower into the Continental Army. That left shortages everywhere, on farms, in workshops, on the water, in the everyday labor that kept a wartime region functioning. The Long Island refugees helped fill those gaps. Farmers worked unfamiliar land. Craftsmen repaired tools, vessels, and buildings. Boatmen handled cargo, transport, and patrol work along the shore. Over the course of the war, dozens of small whaleboats operated out of Connecticut coves, from Norwalk to Greenwich, intercepting British supply vessels, carrying intelligence, and harassing enemy traffic on the Sound. The same men who had once crossed this water to escape were now helping Connecticut weaponize it. When we hear the word refugee, we often imagine someone waiting on the edge of events, hoping to survive until the storm passes. But that is not what happened here. The Long Island refugees who reached Connecticut did not simply disappear into safety. They enlisted, they rowed, they guided, they spied, they sailed on privateers. They used their knowledge of harbors, roads, tides, neighbors, and coves to make themselves useful in a war that had already taken their homes. They were not passengers in someone else's conflict. They were fighting for places they could still describe from memory, for roads they had walked, fields they had planted, and shorelines they knew in the dark. By the time Tallmadge's boats pushed off in 1780, some of the men gripping those oars were no longer just exiles from Long Island. They were part of the machinery of resistance that Connecticut had built on its shore. And then, in 1783, the war ends. Peace brings the question they had postponed for 7 years. Do we go back? And if we do, what is left? That's the story of Episode 8. Subscribe to Northeast Cold Case for the next chapter in Revolutionary Refugees. Because going home, after 7 years of war, may have been the hardest crossing of all.